Volume 3, Book 2, Regicide. France has held back her Cimmerian invaders far over the marches, and likewise she has shattered her own internal social constitution. There is established a Patriot Executive Council of Ministers, with a Patriot Danton in it, and then a whole nation and national convention have taken care of that. We have instantaneous change of the whole body politics, such as poor nymph Semelle's body did experience. This mercurial French people plunges suddenly from Vive le Roi to Vive la République. Freedom, equality, brotherhood, all in its mouth. And so we enter a new phase of consideration amongst the revolutionaries, the considering of whether the reconciled King Louis shall be guillotined or not. And hence, Carlyle titles Chapter 1, The Deliberative. The nation is for present, figuratively speaking, naked. It has no rule or vesture, but is naked, a sans-culotic nation. Royalism, with its old modes and formulas, are to the winds, and shall now govern a France free of formulas. Free of formulas, and yet man lives not except with formulas, with customs, ways of doing and living, no text truer than this, which will hold true from the tea-table and tailor's shop-board up to the high in imagination, onwards to the outmost confines of articulate being, ubi homines sunt modi sunt. There are modes wherever there are men. The quotation Carlyle there takes from Goethe. Moderate men, moderantins, of Brissotins, Rolandins, and finally of Girondins, they shall become world famous in solving this conundrum. But to the convention itself, neither the work nor the method of doing it is doubtful. To make the Constitution, to defend the Republic, till that be made. So there is fear that the Constitution can be made, who doubts, unless the gospel of Jean-Jacques came into the world in vain. So there is no doubt amongst these members of the newly formed National Convention that they can form the Republic, that they can make the Constitution march. Widen your basis, for one thing, to universal suffrage, if need be, exclude rotten materials, royalism, such like, for another thing, and in brief, build. Oh, unspeakable Sieyès and company. Sieyès, of course, being the Abbé Sieyès. It is a sort of scientific program, then. And how shall science calculate or prophesy? Science, which cannot, with all its calculuses, differential integrals, and variations, calculate the problem of three gravitating bodies. So, the three gravitating bodies problem being a famous problem that you could not confirm with any confidence that one body will stay in a particular motion in a three-body problem. And that's what Carlyle is seeing here, a form of chaos. It is a parliament, literally such as there was never elsewhere in the world. Common individuals, most of them, is what Carlyle is getting at here. France fallen wholly into madness and maddest disarrangement. France, with its 25 million vehement souls. It is a kind of apocalyptic convention, or black dream become real. To hate this poor national convention is easy. To praise and love it has not been found impossible. It is, as we say, a parliament in most original circumstances. A convention which has to consume itself, suicidally, and become dead ashes with the world. So the revolt has its course, and it must run it. And how can chaos, though, have a course? Carlyle is looking really at the next state of order as the correction to chaos, rather than this prescribed course of the chaos itself. Nevertheless, let's continue with the chaos that this National Convention will unleash. A fiercely effervescent old Gallic assemblage. Carlyle always willing to link the wild old Gallic element of the revolution. The loud sick sounds of debate and life, of which is a debate, sink silent one after another. They scolded in Celtic Welsh, these Brenuses, neither were they sans-culottes, so he brings in the people from Brest and the people from Brittany, being like, again, a callback to that unsettled Celtic, wilder element to it. On the whole, does not time envelop this present National Convention? Time, surely, and also eternity. How deal with these September massacres, which we had in the previous part? With the parish commune that presided over them, a parish commune hateful, terrible, before which the poor effete legislative had to quail and sit quiet. There's a September departmental guard, and the departmental guard, decreed by overwhelming majorities, and then repealed for peace's sake, and not to insult Paris, is again decreed once more. So there's a September guard, which is sort of an overview of these massacres. It gets repealed, and then it gets put in place again, and you're going to see a lot of this over the next few books as the factions begin to merge in this national convention. Some wanting to go further, and the others wanting to apply this Republic of Virtue, the Girondin position. Nay, it is partially executed. The Paris streets shouting once, being overtaken with liquor, à bas Marat, down with Marat. On the 25th of September 1792, there comes committee report on that committee of the Departmental Guard. And amongst all of this, really, we have the re-emergence of Marat. It is verily Marat, he and not another. Marat is no phantasm of the brain or mere lying impress of printers' types, but a thing material of joint and sinew. References to Job there, in connotation with Marat. A living fraction of chaos and of old night is this Marat in Carlyle's eyes. It appears, says Marat to the shrieking assembly, that a great many persons here are enemies of mine. All shriek hundreds of voices, enough to drown any people's friend. But Marat will not drown. Marat, absolved and applauded victorious in this turn of fence, is, as the debate goes on, pricked at again by some dexterous Girondins. So Marat's really getting accused by the convention of having instigated much of the September massacres and being responsible for a lot of it. But he's trying to find friends and allies in the assembly. Robespierre warned against dictatorship stemming from war, but yet here we are in a position where people are beginning to feel that it's needed. But the old King Louis still needs to find his way out, and they're beginning as an assembly to realize exactly what's required. Barbaroux, he of Marseille, from the south, openly bear testimony against him, this being Robespierre. And Robespierre has fallen out with Pétion, and Pétion ends up joining the Girondins, who have the beginning of the formation of these factions already paving way for the leaving of the scene of Louis, leaving of the scene of royalty from France. Chapter 2, the Executive. As to the armies, public defence must evidently be put on proper footing, for Europe seems coalescing itself again. One is apprehensive even England will join it. Happily Dumouriez prospers in the north. Nay, what if he should prove too prosperous, and become liberticide, murderer of freedom? So there's even a hint that Dumouriez could have been the original sort of Napoleon figure here, to come back as Robespierre's aforementioned dictator, and put a leash on the Deliberative, the National Convention. Roland's strict soul is sick to see the course things take, but what can he do? Keep his own department strict. This is the Minister Roland, Minister of the Interior, who really doesn't have much control. It said, as we stated earlier, it said his wife dictates much of the policy. We have Dame Roland then, bravest of all French women, and she begins to have misgivings. The figure of Danton has too much of the Sardanapalus character, and hence we see Roland begin to side with the Girondins. Pétion, in the midst of this, gets re-elected mayor of Paris, but he has declined, being now a convention legislator. After months of scrutinizing, balloting, arguing, and jargoning, one Dr. Chambon gets the post of honour then in place of him, who will not long keep it, but be, as we shall see, literally crushed out of it. But poor Roland, says Carlyle, seems to have some form of sympathy here for him. Free trade in grain, impossibility to fix the prices of grain. Political economy lecturing from the Home Office, with demonstration clear as scripture, ineffectual for empty national stomach. So this again more jarring with the executive. The formula is not coalescing with the reality. The Mayor Chartres, like to be eaten himself, cries to the convention, on the edge of horrid death they did fix, or affect to fix, the price of grain. As to the origin of these grain riots, is it not most probably your secret royalists again? So again we have suspicion. Glimpses of priests were discernible. Unhappy perjured king. So again there's another hunger riot, which happens really because of the dysfunction of the National Convention, but they can still have the king to blame on, and it's the king and it's the figure of the king which is holding back the factions from really going at each other, Girondins against Jacobins or Sans-Culottes. Hunger shall stalk direful, and wrath suspicion wedded to the preternatural pitch shall stalk, as those other preternatural shapes of God in their watchfulness were discerned stalking in glare and gloom of that fire ocean when Troy town fell. Again, that's taken from Goethe's Faust. Chapter 3, Discrowned. But the question more pressing than all on the legislator as yet is the third question. What shall be done with King Louis? So we had the deliberative. What should be done with the September massacres and the people who had instigated them? Then we had the executive question. How do we deal with Dumouriez? Now we have the third. How do we do King Louis? He's a prisoner in his own apartment. His traitor veto had gotten him there, leading to the events of August 1792, which we had in part 13. Circuit of the Temple, he has heard and seen the loud whirls of things, yells of September massacres, Brunswick war thunders dying off in disaster and discomfiture, he passive, a spectator merely. Keep him prisoner. He is a secret centre for the disaffected, for endless plots, attempts, and hopes of theirs. Banish him, and he certainly is an open centre for them. So this is the problem they have. Whether he's prisoner, he's still alive, he's still a target, and a figure of hope for royalists. Banish him, and he has an open centre for them, and he becomes the royal standard that you all feared. Put him to death, then? Cruel, questionable extremity, that too, and yet the likeliest in these extreme circumstances. Of insurrectionary men, from the last step of the throne to the first of the scaffold, there is short distance. And that saying, from the last step of the throne to the first of the scaffold, there is short distance, is quite a famous one. It was printed in Le Moniteur on the 24th of January 1793, and it is a quote by Barrère. L'histoire de tous les pays atteste que dans toutes les révolutions des empires, il n'y a pas loin du trône à l'échafaud. He has fallen, this Louis so low, this once high man. No criminal nor traitor, how far from it, but the unhappiest of human solecisms. The French nation in simultaneous desperate dead pull, and as if by miracle of madness has pulled down the most dread Goliath, huge with the growth of 10 centuries. Cannot believe, though his giant bulk covering acres lies prostrate, bound with peg and pack thread. So Carlyle identifies Goliath with Titius, son of Zeus and Gaia, whose body covered 9 acres, which is an allusion to Gulliver's Travels. There is on record a trial of Charles I, so they have precedent from England. This printed trial of Charles I and read everywhere present, quel spectacle! Thus did the English people judge their tyrant and become the first of free peoples. It was appointed of fate that, in this wide weltering, strangely growing, monstrous, stupendous imbroglio of convention business, the grand first parent of all questions, controversies, measures, and enterprises, which were to be evolved there, to the world's astonishment, should be this question of King Louis. And so Louis will finally be stripped of all agency. Chapter 4. The Loser Pays. We enter the 6th of November, 1792. Dumouriez is overrunning the Netherlands, and he is swept back on his wing and then swept back on that. Dumouriez, may Rouget de Lille, in figurative speech, be said to have gained miraculously, like another Orpheus, by his Marseille fiddle strings, his Fidibus Canoris, a victory of Jemappe, and conquered the Low Countries. We have a young General Egalité alongside him, the son of Louis Philippe, who was the liberally minded cousin to the king, the main betrayer of his aristocratic class. His son is there with Dumouriez. The Netherlands are conquered, at least, overrun by Jacobin missionaries. So the minute they're conquered, the gateway opens up for Jacobin missionaries to enter. And Carlyle again alluding to the religiosity of this by calling them missionaries. Your proles, pereires, follow in the train of the armies. But in the hall of the convention we have the Committee on the Crimes of Louis. Deputy Valazé, reporter on this occasion, thinks Louis is very criminal. But Valazé is Girondin, who maybe try it himself one day. The problem with the execution of the throne is that it goes all the way back to the formation of the Capets. How much of this is entwined with France itself? Can France truly exist without a king? Everyone hates Louis, but can they actually go through with this final step? What about Louis Capet scornfully ejaculates patriotism? Mean criminals go to the gallows for a person cut, and this chief criminal guilty of a France slashed asunder with Clotho scissors and civil war, with his victims 1,200 on the 10th of August alone. The firing of the Swiss Guards, where they exaggerated the numbers, most likely. Lying low in the catacombs, fattening the passes of the Argonne Wood. Oh, Valmy and Farfields, he, such chief criminal, shall not even come to the bar? For alas, O patriotism, the 1,200 on the 10th of August are not rebel traitors, but victims and martyrs. Legislative head, regicide, asks the Gironde respectability, to kill a king and become the horror of spectacles of nations and persons. And to do that, they'll have to do one thing. Stretch the formula. And so we enter chapter 5, stretching of formulas. Girondins, meanwhile, are interrogating Robespierre. I accuse thee, Robespierre, I, Jean-Baptiste Louvet. Danton cries, speak, Robespierre, there are many good citizens that listen. But the tongue refused its office. And so Louvet, with a shrill tone, read and recited crime after crime. They're still going after what Robespierre and some of the Jacobins were doing in the September massacres. Dictatorial temper, exclusive popularity, bullying at elections, mob retinue, September massacres. He is the incorruptible, this Robespierre, about to be indicted in this sudden manner, could not be refused a week of delay. That week he is not idle, nor is the Mother Society idle. So the Mother Society is really his grassroots formation and support, and can always take over. They're a real active body, scattered in various clubs and coffee houses throughout France, and able to act quickly and decisively the further into chaos you get, to work outside the muddled conventions of the National Convention. The Convention, eager for public business, dismisses these comparative misères and despicabilities. Splenetic, Louvet must digest his spleen, regretfully forever. Robespierre, dear to patriotism, is dearer for the dangers he has run. Carlyle highlights this really as a passage where they could have nipped Robespierre in the bud, but don't. Allow him to fester. Continue on. This is the second grand attempt by a Girondin Friends of Order to extinguish the black spot in their domain. Recall that they were going after Marat before this. They realised, the Girondins, that the September massacres was pure anarchy. They do not want it to be repeated, but can they go through with destroying it? Enter another character, Demoiselle Théroigne. This is Anne-Joseph Théroigne de Méricourt, Belgian singer, orator, and organizer in the French Revolution. She was a co-founder of Parisian Revolutionary Club and had warrants for her arrest issued in France for her alleged participation in the October days of uprising. Remember the March of the Women. She'd been imprisoned by Austrians, returned to Paris in January 1792, and here she begins to have affiliations with the Girondins. She herself gets scandalously fustigated in these last days of 1792. Strange enough, it is the same tribune raised in mid-air where a high Mirabeau, a high Barnave, and aristocrat Lametz once standed. And gradually Aubrisseaus, Gaudets, Vigneaus, a hotter style of patriotism in bonnet rouge did displace. Red heat, as one might say, superseding light. And now your Brisseaus in turn and Brissotins, Rolandins, Girondins are becoming supernumerary, must desert the sittings or be expelled. The light of the mighty mother is burning, not red but blue. Provincial daughter societies loudly disapprove these things. We reach the 20th of November 1792. Dingy Smith Gamin comes over to the Paris municipality over the minister Roland. with hints that he, Smith Gammon, knows a thing, that in May last, when traitorous correspondence was so brisk, he and the royal apprentice fabricated an iron press, armoire de fe, cunningly inserting the same in a wall of the royal chamber in the Tuileries, invisible under the wainscot, where doubtless it still sticks. So this is, in Tals, we say, and without notarial inventory, an oversight on the part of Roland. So it's a plot, this, about the iron press, that Roland is basically letting things sneak out, and the Jacobins turn against Roland. Amid obstructions and stimulating furtherances has the question of the trial to grow. O august senators, the only law in this case is vae victis, the loser pays. Seldom did Robespierre say a wiser word than the hint he gave to that affection in his oration, that it was needless to speak of law, that here, if never elsewhere, our right was might, an oration admired most to ecstasy by the Jacobin patriot. Who else shall say that Robespierre is not a thoroughgoing man, bold in logic at least? But what can be more unprofitable than the sight of 749 ingenious men struggling with their whole force and industry for a long course of weeks to do at bottom this, to stretch out the old formula and law phraseology, so that it may cover the new, contradictory, entirely uncoverable thing. This of stretching out formulas till they crack is, especially in times of swift change, one of the sorrowfulest tasks poor humanity has. Chapter 6. At the Bar. We reach Tuesday, 11th of December, and the King's trial has finally emerged. Into the streets of Paris, in the shape of the green carriage of Mayor Chambon, within it sits the King himself, by Commandant Santerre, with cannon, cavalry, and double row of infantry. Descending through the Place Vendôme towards the Salle de Manège, the same bodily Louis who once, Louis the Desired, fares there, hapless king, Santerre holding Louis's arm with his hand. We have Barrère, who once wept looking up from his editor desk, looks down now from his president's chair with a list of 57 questions and says, dry-eyed, "Louis, you may sit down." Louis sits down. And this Barrère is Bertrand Barrère, French politician, Freemason, journalist, and really comes to the fore in this new mould of the National Convention. In September 1792, he was elected to the National Convention for the Department of Hautes-Pyrénées, so from the Pyrenees. Barrère served as presiding officer of the National Convention and chaired this trial of Louis XVI, hence his emergence now. The 57 questions and documents to the number of 162 being exhausted in this manner, Barrère finishes, after some 3 hours, with his "Louis, I invite you to withdraw." Louis withdraws under municipal escort into a neighbouring committee room, demanded to have legal counsel. But overall it is passivity alone without activity, is sitting and demanding. The Temple Circuit again receives him and closes on him. Louis is now separated from his queen and family. The convention, after debate, has granted him legal counsel that he was looking for. An advocate, Target, is sent for, but he feels himself too old, being turned of 54, and declines. He had gained great honour once, defending Rohan in the necklace scandal in the 1780s, but will gain none here. Advocate Tronchet, some 10 years older, does not decline, so it's obviously just an excuse to get out of the limelight by Target, who feels that by defending Louis at this point, he himself will be next. We reach Wednesday the 26th of December, and Louis shall appear and plead. His advocates complain that it is fatally soon. But to patriotism, it seems endlessly late. Louis and his 3 advocates, escorted by the clang and arms of Santerre's National Guard, enter the hall. Dissez unfolds his paper. Louis fell on his neck when they had withdrawn and said with tears, "Mon pauvre Dissez." This is Raymond Dissez, a French advocate, and together with Tronchet he defended Louis XVI in this trial. To be held guilty of the bloodshed of the 10th of August is what is namely on trial here. See how they will get rid of the character of Louis. Nevertheless, a doubting, apprehensive convention decides that it will still deliberate first, that all members who desire it shall have to leave to speak. To your desks, therefore, ye eloquent members. France and the universe listens. Deputy Thuriot, who was an advocate Thuriot, who was a lector Thuriot, and from the top of the Bastille saw Saint Antoine rising like the ocean. This Thuriot can stretch a formula as heartily as most men. But on the whole, let no man conceive it possible that Louis is not guilty. The only question for a reasonable man is, or was, can the convention judge Louis? Or must it be the whole people, in primary assembly, and with delay? Always delay, ye Girondins, false hommes d'etat. So bellows patriotism, its patience almost failing. So really we see the Girondins being pressured into a quicker and more decisive decision by the Mother Society and the Jacobins. When you stretch the formula, you leave it open for might to come in. And the Jacobins, in Carlyle's view, represent the might. The Girondins represent those who will always try and look for a formula before they act. It is a heart, this convention, as we said, which sends out influences and receives them, then. On the 19th of November, it emitted a decree, and has since confirmed and unfolded the details of it, that any nation which might see good to shake off the fetters of despotism was thereby, so to speak, the sister of France, and should have help and countenance. Jacob Dupont is in the Loire country then, and the convention is speculating on a plan of national education. Deputy Dupont, in his speeches, says, I am free to avow, Monsieur le Président, that I, for my part, am an atheist. So this is the sort of milieu we have just deciding and deliberating on the fate of Louis right now. An atheist. Well then, who cares about Louis's divine right of kings? The foreign world received it with confutation, with horror and astonishment. Foreign courts interfere in this trial of Louis. Spain, England, not to be listened to. Olive branch in one hand and the sword without scabbard in the other. Eventually emerges as the convention, justice on the traitor. Cries all the patriot world. Consider also this other cry, heard aloud on the streets. Give us bread, or else kill us. Bread and equality, justice on the traitor, that we may have bread. And we said the Chambon would not be mayor of Paris for long, and here we have it. Jacobin heads are flying up there. Mayor Chambon hastens with Santerre and hopes to quell it. He with regret quits the brief mayoralty altogether, his lungs being affected, quote-unquote. But theatre riots, bread or else kill us, with rage, hunger, preternatural suspicion, does this wild Paris pipe. Roland grows ever more querulous in his messages and letters, rising almost to the hysterical pitch. Marat, whom no power on earth can prevent seeing into traitors and Rolands, takes to bed for 3 days, almost dead, the invaluable people's friend, with heartbreak, fever, headache. O peuple babillard, si tu savais agir. People of babblers, if thou couldst but act. Donnez-nous du pain, ou égorgez-nous, is the Histoire Parlementaire quote for give us bread or kill us. What about Dumouriez, then? The frontier, still ongoing in this chaos. In these New Year's days, he's arrived in Paris. So, Dumouriez comes back to Paris. He pretends to be complaining of Minister Pache and Hassan Fraz, dilapidations, to be the concerting measures of the spring campaign. One finds him much in the company of the Girondins, plotting with them against Jacobinism, against equality, and the punishment of Louis. I remember there was a period in which Lafayette fled into the arms of the enemies because the revolution had come too much for him. His patriotism run its course. Dumouriez, being sly, more wily, felt that there was still an opportunity for him to go up into the ranks amidst the chaos, but he could not let it get out of control, and now we have Dumouriez coming in and saying, I need to put my own authority on it. Try where Lafayette failed. We have letters of his to the convention itself. Will he act the old Lafayette part, this new victorious general? Let him withdraw again, not undenounced. And we cut short. On Tuesday next, the 15th of January 1793, it shall go to the vote. Name by name, in one way or other, this great game play itself out. Chapter 7. The Three Votings. Is Louis Capet guilty of conspiring against liberty? Shall our sentence be itself final, or need ratifying by appeal to the people? If guilty, what punishment? These questions still await us. 3 successive questions whereon the Convention shall now pronounce. Paris floods round their hall, multitudinous, many-sounding. Europe and all nations listen for their answers. No doubt in the mind of the patriot men. Guilt. Unanimous Convention votes for guilt. Only some feeble 28 voting not innocent, but refusing to vote at all. Neither does the second question prove doubtful, whatever the Girondins might calculate. There shall be no appeal. Girondins proposing that a majority of 3/4 shall be required. Patriots fiercely resisting them. What punishment? Girondins are undecided. Patriots are decided. Long night wears itself into days. Morning's paleness is spread over all faces. Member after member is mounting continually those tribune steps, pausing aloft there in the clear upper light, to speak his fate word, then diving down into the dusk and throng again, like phantoms in the hour of midnight, most spectral, pandemonial. Death, banishment, imprisonment, till the peace. Many say death, with what cautious, well-studied phrases and paragraphs they could devise of explanation, of enforcement, of faint recommendation to mercy. Many, too, say banishment, something short of death. This balance trembles. None can yet guess whitherward, whereat anxious patriotism bellows, irrepressible by ushers. Vergniaud himself says death. Vergniaud, the great orator of the National Convention. Men see the figures of shrill sièges descend, abbé sièges, hardly poising, passing merely to say this figure, la mort sans phrase, death without phrases, and fares onward and downward, most spectral, pandemonial. The world is all an optical shadow. In profoundest silence, President Vergniaud, with a voice full of sorrow, has to say, I declare in the name of the Convention that the punishment it pronounces on Louis Capet is that of death. Death by a small majority of 53. Scarcely is the vote declared when Louis's 3 advocates enter, with protest in his name, with demand for delay, for appeal to the people. For this do Desaises and Tronchet plead, with brief eloquence. But the Convention rejects the appeal to the people, that having been already settled. But as to the delay, what they call sursis, it shall be considered. So then we have a 4th vote. And patriotism, by long watching, has become red-eyed. Finally, at 3 o'clock in the morning, Sunday morning, we have no delay. By a majority of 70, death within 24 hours. Garat, Minister of Justice, has to go to the Temple with a stern message. He ejaculates repeatedly, Quelle commission affreuse! What a frightful function! Louis begs for a confessor, for yet 3 days of life, to prepare himself to die. There is no deliverance, then. Thick stone walls answer none. Has King Louis no friends, men of action, of courage, grown desperate in this extreme need? King Louis's friends are feeble and far. For all the thoughts the National Convention had on plotters, royalists everywhere, there's no one here to save Louis. Robespierre sees reason to think that Prince d'Artois himself is privately in town, that the Convention will be butchered in the lump. Patriotism sounds mere wail and vengeance. Santerre doubles and trebles all his patrols. Pity is lost in rage and fear. The Convention has refused the 3 days of life and all respite. Chapter 8. Place de la Révolution. O hapless Louis! The son of 60 kings is to die on the scaffold by form of law. Under 60 kings, this same form of law, form of society, has been fashioning itself together these 1,000 years, and has become one way and other a most strange machine, dead blind, not what it should be. Behold now a king himself, or rather, kinghood in his person, is to here expire in cruel tortures, like a Phalaris, shut in the belly of his own red-heated brazen bull. Innocent Louis bears the sins of many generations. A king dying by such violence appeals impressively to the imagination, as the likes must do and ought to do. And yet at the bottom it is not the king dying, but the man. Kingship is a coat. The grand loss is of the skin. A confessor has come, Abbé Edgeworth, of Irish extraction, whom the king knew by good report. When the king spoke, the sobbing princesses redoubled. All our loving and our sufferings, and confused toilings under earthly sun, are over. Ecclesiastes. They are Cherubis municipals, these. King Louis slept sound till 5 in the morning, when Clary, as he had been ordered, awoke him. Clary dressed his hair. While this went forward, Louis took a ring from his watch. At 6:30 he took the sacrament, and continued in devotion and conference with Abbé Edgeworth. At 8 the municipals enter. The king gives him his will. At 9 Santerre says the hour is come. Stamping on the ground with his right foot, Louis answers, "Partons, let us go." How the rolling of those drums comes in. There is a queenly wife, soon to be a widow. She weeps bitterly. A king's sister and children. Over all these 4 does death also hover. All shall perish miserably save one. She, as Duchess d'Angoulême, will live, not happily. At the Temple gate, where some faint cries, perhaps from voices of pitiful women, "Glass, glass!" All windows are down, none seen looking through them. All shops are shut. No wheel carriage rolls this morning in the streets, but only one. 80,000 armed men stand ranked, like armed statues of men. Cannons bristle, cannoneers with match burning, but no word or movement. Louis reads in his book of devotion the prayers of the dying. There is great silence. There is feigned struggle heavenward. There is forgetting of the earth. As the clock strike 10, behold the Place de la Révolution, once Place de Louis XV. The guillotine mounted near the old pedestal where once stood the statue of that Louis. D'Orléans Égalité is there in cabriolet. Arrived now at the Black Maelstrom in the descent of death. The drums are beating. Tassez-vous! Silence. He cries in a terrible voice, d'une voix terrible. His hands are tied, his head bare. The fatal moment is come. He advances to the edge of the scaffold. His face very red, and says, "Frenchman, I die innocent. It is from the scaffold and near. Appearing before God that I tell you so. I pardon my enemies. I desire that France," a general on horseback, Santerre, and another prances out with uplifted hand. "Tambour!" The drums drown out the voice. "Executioners, do your duty." 6 of them desperate, him singly desperate, struggling there, and bind him to their plank. Abbé Edgeworth, stooping, bespeaks him, "Son of Saint Louis, ascend to heaven." The axe clanks down. A king's life is shorn away. It is Monday, the 21st of January, 1793. His age was 38 years, 4 months, and 28 days. Executioner Sampson shows the head. Fierce shout of "Vive la République" rises. D'Orléans drives off in his cabriolet. Town hall councillors rub their hands, saying, "It is done. It is done." The world wags on, as if it were a common day. In the coffee-houses that evening, says Proudhon, patriot, shook hands with patriot in a more cordial manner than usual. Not till some days after, according to Messier, did public men see what a grave thing it was. A grave thing it indisputably is, and will have consequences. On Thursday comes Le Pelletier, Saint-Forgot's funeral, and passage to the Pantheon of great men. This is a martyr for the Revolution, given passage to the Pantheon. Notable also for another thing, this burial of Le Pelletier. It was the last act these men ever did with concert. All parties and figures of opinion that agitate this distracted France and its convention now stand, as it were, face to face, dagger to dagger. Dumouriez, conquering Holland, growls ominous discontent at the head of armies. Men say Dumouriez will have a king. that young D'Orléans Égalité shall be his king. Atheism, regicide, total destruction of social order in this world. England signifies to citizen Chauvelin, the ambassador, or rather ambassador's cloak, that he must quit the country in 8 days. All declare war. The sword is drawn, the scabbard thrown away. It is even as Danton said, in one of his all too gigantic figures, "The coalized kings threaten us. We hurl at their feet, as gauge of battle, the head of a king."